Hi there, this is Chris Jones, independent candidate in Ottawa Centre. I want to speak to you today about one of the three planks of my election campaign, which is that of citizens' assemblies, or what I have called elsewhere public interest councils. Now, in order to set this up, I want to contrast it a little bit with what the status quo is presently in government. So to illustrate that point, I want to take you back to November 2016, about a year into the Prime Minister Trudeau's current mandate. He chooses to meet in Toronto at the Shangri-La Hotel with a series of large sovereign investment funds, wealth management companies, pension funds. These are all global entities with very deep pockets. And he and a group of his ministers sit down in some closed-door meetings to strategize, I guess, about how those private dollars might be married up with public dollars in the service of new infrastructure projects. Now, this is what it's typically called in our current system of government, a kind of pro bono advisory council, where some of these wealthy financiers and investment types lend their expertise to government officials, supposedly in the interest of serving the public interest. And from the little research that I've done on this matter, I understand that the government spent a great deal of time, several months, preparing for this meeting. Now, at the end of the day, we don't know what will come out of those different recommendations. But what we do know is that is a profoundly anti-democratic way to exercise your mandate. I want to talk about something very different. I want to talk about how a truly representative and democratic government would seek to enlist ordinary citizens in citizen assemblies, in which their purpose would be the development and promotion of the public interest in Canada. So where does this idea come from? Basically, citizen assemblies were around at the creation of our democracy in Athens, when citizens were drawn by lot to serve various public functions in Athens. And at other times in our history, it's been used as well in other parts of the world, such as Italy. More recently, a few years ago, the Irish used these citizen assemblies to amend their constitution around issues of marriage equality. And they enlisted ordinary citizens to serve in some kind of advisory bodies that would go around the country, seek the input of their fellow Irish countrymen and women, and come up with some recommendations that could be taken to the Dáil, the parliamentary body in Ireland, for recommended changes to the Irish constitution around marriage equality, which ultimately proved to be very successful, and those recommendations were adopted. Now, we have a system in Canada where at present an MP who is elected, in order to become a candidate, first of all, his or her nomination paper must be signed by the leader of the party. Once in Ottawa and once in the parliamentary caucus, a huge onus is placed on loyalty and discipline. So caucus discipline becomes a bottom line criteria and consideration. Whipped voting is the norm. So most major votes are whipped. In other words, the party's instructed how to vote. And finally, any person who fancies their chances of eventually being promoted to cabinet is required to show unswerving loyalty to the leader, to the Prime Minister's office, and so on. In my view, at this point in the 21st century, with the kinds of problems that we have, this system is no longer fit for purpose. I actually believe now that we need something quite different. And I want to explain what that would look like. But before I do so, I want to just tell you a little bit about my experience at all candidates meetings in the last few weeks. So we go to an all candidates meeting, and the parties are up there. In some cases, the independent candidates are there, but not always. And then they're members of the public. And the members of the public put a series of questions to the candidates, and the parties trot out their sort of pre-formulated answers. And it's basically a set of pre-packaged ideas about what they're going to do for this group or that. And then everybody leaves the room after a couple of hours, I suppose, with a warm glow of having participated in the democratic process. Now, this happens once every 4 years. And what happens more practically immediately after a party is elected and has been chosen to form a government is that those ideas, whatever their merits, are immediately scrutinized very carefully by a series of public servants who might tell the ministers and the prime minister that this or that item is affordable or not. A whole group of lobbyists and other special interest representatives come in to meet with public servants, with politicians and MPs, and with the Prime Minister's office. And they endeavor to make sure that the expression of democratic political choice that has just occurred in the election does not run afoul of their own interests and needs and concerns. And in some cases, this will amount to basically undercutting, stymieing, providing an obstacle to the measure that has been proposed. And in the past, there have been many instances of this in Canada, where good, sound public policy ideas that have received the support of the Canadian public in a democratic exercise have been ultimately undermined. So my view at this point is we need something else. It's not to replace the current system. We're going to continue to have a representative parliamentary system with MPs and, for the time being, I guess, with parties. However, we need something that coexists in parallel to the parliamentary system, and that has got to be citizens' assemblies. And citizens' assemblies is an idea that is now gaining traction around the world. And my idea is that we would choose 30 randomly chosen citizens. The phrase is drawn by lot, with no prerequisite screening for education, professional status, gender, anything. We would basically choose randomly 30 citizens. Hopefully we would have an equal balance of men and women. But basically we are choosing randomly. And these people would meet in each federal riding. So there would be 338 of these. And they would meet to debate, discuss, deliberate, exchange ideas, and inform themselves about issues of the day, be it income inequality, climate change, transportation, food safety, you name the issue. And the purpose would be that they would inform themselves through acquisition of data, evidence, access to expert public testimony, to objective, and I mean by that public science as opposed to private for-profit science. And they would inform themselves about the state of the world and the range of options open to Canada. And twice a month, in my schema, the MP would be required to meet with this group so that they would sit down and exchange opinions, ideas, recommendations, views, findings, etc. And I think that this system now, given the state of the world, is absolutely imperative. The idea that an MP who we empower once every 4 years, who then disappears down the rabbit hole of the parliamentary caucus system with its absolute onus placed on party loyalty, the refusal to act independently, to exercise their individual agency, has led us to a place where we are not getting good public policy anymore. So my view is that these citizen assemblies or public interest councils would act as a kind of cross-section of informed opinion, a small group of 30 people who have informed themselves, who've had some time off of work. And I'm not talking about providing them with a salary. I'm simply saying they should be given paid time off work, or if they're a student or a homemaker or retired, They would all meet together several times a month to discuss and debate amongst themselves, and then meet with the MPs. And I think that this solution is ultimately what is called for. We need, in other words, not this consultation that we go through during elections, which happens once every 4 years. I'm talking about month in and month out, constant discussion by a group of citizens. Think of it in a way as parallel to a jury, where people would be chosen. And my proposal is that they might, their tenure might be 2 years before another group of citizens would be chosen to replace them. And they would meet on a monthly basis, several times a month, to talk over the issues. And the MP would then meet with them. And I guess my question would be, had we had something like that this past winter when the SNC-Lavalin debate was raging, and you know, the Prime Minister chose to ignore a lot of people who wanted to see the principle of the independence of the judiciary respected, and instead moved the Justice Minister out of her portfolio and ultimately kicked her and another eminent MP, Jane Philpott, out of caucus. I don't think that travesty would have happened had there been 30 ordinary citizens sitting in each federal riding, and those Liberal MPs would have had to go back to their ridings on the weekend and presumably exchange views and opinions. My hunch, my intuition, is that probably 85 or 90% of those people would have said, under no circumstances infringe the principle of judicial independence. But we don't have that kind of a system. And unfortunately, we're at a stage now where we have some serious, vexing issues that our elites have demonstrated themselves to be incapable of solving. And what is missing in the mix now are the voices and views of ordinary citizens who must be given a place at the table on a regular basis. I'm not talking about replacing the elected representative system. I'm talking about the two groups coexisting as equals for some time. Now, I know this has implications for the party system and for issues around party loyalty and so on, but I think the bigger issue at this point is we need good governance. It is sadly lacking. It was very much lacking under the previous government of Stephen Harper, who arguably arrogated power to himself and a small group of his advisors just as much as the current government has. So I think both major parties have let us down very badly on this front. And I think as an independent MP, this would be one of the things that I would absolutely push for to ensure that you, the voters of Ottawa Centre, had an ongoing established forum for you to meet on a monthly basis, and that the MP, in this case it would be me, I would meet with you every single month, twice a month, to listen and obtain your views and opinions, and then feed that back into the mix. This system that we have at the moment is dysfunctional and not fit for purpose. So in the next video, I'm going to talk to you about one of my other two ideas, which is probably going to concern the role of lobbyists. So thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.